Hi, Adam.
Hello.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. And thanks so much for joining us. During these interesting times, we would like to share some great discussions with you and that we are having with different thought leaders and professionals, where we talk about the realities of what we are going through and more as well about remote and virtual work and the platform economy. We do deep dives in important topics and tackle some of the real challenges and ask some of the difficult questions. Hi, I'm Emma and I'm the CEO of One Circle HR, the coolest freelance platform for HR consultants. You like this one, huh? You can't get over
I dig it. I like it.
We are cheerleaders of virtual remote work, and with every discussion, we hope we can make the journey of some of you towards virtual work more enjoyable. We know that there are a lot of great content out there, and we want ours to be easy to digest and implement with depth of expertise. But as well, we want it to be fun, and this is why we have this type of conversations. Today, joining me is Adam. Adam, you are a hands-on HR professional and with specialist expertise in talent acquisition. And you always say you are a disappointed Dallas Cowboy fan, so I have no idea why.
Yeah. I mean, I think our American audience sort of understands that. It's a football team or American football team that tends to lose at the worst possible moments and has done that for the past 25 years. It's a lot like, yeah. I mean, it's I'm trying to give a good comparison because you're a soccer fan, right?
Oh, no, not really. No.
No.
But no, no, I am not. But I get you because I know my husband as well gets a lot disappointed when he's watching his favorite teams, and then yeah, at that particular moment when you can see it on TV and it's very easy to score and nothing happens, that's disappointing.
Yeah, it's yeah, the Cowboys have been very disappointing over the last 25 years. So that's why I say perennially disappointed because every year, you have high expectations and then they break your heart.
Yes.
So
Aw. Okay, so I can see quite a few people are joining us. It will be really great if you tell us a bit where you are from and where you're connecting from.
yeah.
So, Adam,
So
you are actually one of the first few HR professionals who have joined One Circle HR platform. So you were with us from the beginning and really thank you for that. And you're a big advocate actually for the platform economy and platform work for several reasons, which we're going to talk about right now.
yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I guess I know you were asking me where I was from, and so I'm actually coming from Austin, Texas, which is I think 2 or 3 international planes flights away from Johannesburg. And
Yes.
so for those of you unfamiliar with the United States, there is more than just LA and New York. I'm in Texas, the second largest state in the United States. We have about 20 some odd million people. And I'm in Austin.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I'm in Austin, which is the capital, and we have about 1 million people. Right now, we're the 11th largest state or city in the nation. So,
Wow.
And the 4th largest in Texas. So
That's amazing. I didn't know that. That's good facts. So a bit of more good facts about me for those who don't know me yet. I'm more of a mixed bag.
yeah,
So I'm originally Lebanese and I lived and worked most of my professional life in the Gulf region between Qatar and Dubai. I've covered as part of my corporate roles, I've covered the Middle East region, including Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, you name it, North Africa, pockets of Europe. Married to a South African, right now living in South Africa under lockdown. And I have 3 kids and I have 2 teenage boys that are living in Canada in Montreal. So you can connect the whole globe talking about diversity and inclusion, right? So, so yeah, let's get to the heart of it. I know that today we're here to talk about a subject that is very dear to your heart because, and this is actually how we've met on LinkedIn with you talking about bias and hiring bias. So, Adam, what is exactly hiring bias in your opinion?
Yeah, so I think what we have to start with is you have to start with, the definition of like what is bias. And
Yes.
obviously bias is, for lack of a better term, a favoritism towards a particular, person, race, group, entity, by virtue. It's just a particular favoritism.
Yeah.
And then let's take it even further. You have conscious and unconscious bias. So like conscious bias is what you are favoring, sort of intentionally favoring, or almost publicly stating your preference. Unconscious bias is a result of actions that have almost been programmed in you that you don't
Yeah.
even realize happens. And so when we talk about hiring bias, we have to separate that, because there are some people who exhibit conscious hiring bias. There are some who exhibit unconscious hiring bias. And so the goal, and obviously what has happened is those who have contributed this bias and exhibited this bias have, negatively, for the most part, impacted the workplace.
Yes.
There are a lot of underrepresented groups, women, LGBTQ members, Black, Brown, who have been affected by the bias of hiring managers. And if we take that even further, that bias also extends to like performance reviews and promotions. And so, that's why we see a dearth of leadership, a dearth of the underrepresented leadership at the top. And so, yeah, today, I mean, I guess we're going to be talking about how, what that unconscious bias look like, what is conscious bias, how to fix it,
Yeah.
and really, ways to make your hiring process and your organization more inclusive. Sorry, that was a run-on sentence.
Yeah. So it's a good point because I actually read a post today on LinkedIn that got me to think, and that post talks about introverts and extroverts, and and on that particular point that she was making, she was saying that we always try to give advice to people to become more extroverts, but isn't that bias? That we are more biased and towards the people who are more extrovert, and we try to push away the people who are introverts. Why? How is it that we don't just leave them and let them be the way that they are? And it got me to think that in my previous role, being sitting on the other side of the chair as a recruiter when I was in HR, and subconsciously you prefer the people who are talkative, who you can
Yeah.
have a good and great conversation with.
Yeah.
And then yes, exactly. And but how does that, but you don't realize it, Adam, right?
No, you don't, and that's what's interesting about it is because yeah, you're right. Because as a recruiter, you're always like, yeah, that was a great conversation.
Yes.
But sometimes you don't necessarily realize that maybe that introvert is very concise in what they're saying. They're not going to they're going to say what's needed,
Yeah.
and they're not really one for BS. I found this really interesting because in my first recruiting role, I was recruiting a variety of positions. And
Mm.
so I was recruiting in construction, and I would recruit these superintendents. And these guys, man, they could talk your ear off for an hour. and they would talk to you about, you know, all their girlfriends and their projects and what they were eating that day. And at the end, you just be like, oh man, this was a great conversation. And then I would recruit estimators, and these guys, it was a pain just to get anything out of them. And
Yes,
it was
like
like,
auditors.
yeah, and it's like, yeah, auditors, accountants, and it's like, well, you know, this is like, I just didn't have a great conversation. Then you realize, you know, these people are numbers oriented. You know, they're not really interested in talking. They're interested in showing you, whereas other positions are more like let's BS, let's, you know,
Yes.
let's talk. And I mean, I think too, you know, let's take that even further. You know, we talk about different cultures around the world.
Yeah.
Different cultures are like high context versus low context cultures,
Right.
and you know, maybe, you know, whereas some are maybe stoic, very business-like, very proper, don't say much. Like whereas others, like I know, for example, like, you know, Latin American cultures are very relationship oriented.
Mhm.
You know, it's we can't get down to business until we've talked for like 45 minutes, and
Yeah,
you
like
have
like us Arabs as well.
yeah,
You know, we need the whole conversation will be 1 hour, but the social part of it will be like 45 minutes, and the business part will be 15 minutes only.
yeah, but that's the thing is like, and you know, I don't think people, a lot of hiring managers don't understand that too, especially when they're interviewing people from other cultures. It's
Yes,
and so we had a comment in the chat. You know, some
from
people may,
Celeste.
yeah, make people, they, you know, they make bad hiring decisions because some people interview well, and like that's, it's an example of bias. Like some people, it's all about sometimes it's like all about the relationship, and some people are better at relationships than others. But you know, sometimes they were just raised in a culture where it's like, hey, you know, like this is business, and then this
Yes,
is pleasure. Like I remember reading, I have, there's another comment in there from a friend of mine, in the Asian culture, and it was like, when you have business, but then like you're expected at the end of the night, like to go out and drink
yes,
with your boss, and that sort of thing. And then like in America, it's a little bit different. Like we don't necessarily expect you to do that, but you know, once again, it's an example of relationship building and bias, and um, things that we need to watch out for.
So on that point, it's interesting to think. So I've worked in Dubai for a long time, and it's a multicultural pot, right?
Hmm.
90% of the people that are in the UAE are actually expats. So you've got all different nationalities. But so we work with different nationalities, different cultures, and different people coming with different traditional backgrounds, etc. And then you just get used to it. So it becomes part of your working culture, and then after a while, you just realize that that corporate or business environment starts having its own internal culture.
So we call that affinity bias,
Okay.
and you know, and I think that's an issue in a lot of different business communities. You know, we talk
Mhm.
about like the real estate community, the tech community, the law community. Is, you know, you say they have their own culture, and so
Yes.
you know, a lot of times, my buddy Alex is on this call, and you know, we talk about employer branding all the time, and all these companies, they talk about hiring for culture fit,
Yes.
and you know, and it's like, if you do not conform to this particular culture, you will not be hired.
Yes.
And I think that is a huge form of bias that a lot of people are slowly realizing, but didn't necessarily realize before.
So
um,
on that point, Adam, it's funny because I'm a certified interviewer. So I had to pull that one out, right? But the thing is that you are supposed to look for a job or role fit, and you're supposed to look for a culture fit. But why? but then the understanding of culture is more around values alignment.
Correct.
Yeah, and this is what you meant by affinity. Is that values that underpin everything that create a level of trust between the people that are working together.
Well, let's talk about that values alignment, because I want to talk about culture fit versus culture add versus values add. And I think, we've had this conversation before. Let's talk marriage, for example. I don't marry somebody because they're a culture fit. I mean, we see it. Well, no, but think about it though. Like, you are married to somebody who is South African. You are Lebanese. I mean, in the
Yes.
United States, we have interracial marriages. We have people marrying from different communities. So, like, why should business be that way as well? It's about
Yeah.
what can you add. It should be, and it's a huge example of bias. It's what can you add to the culture,
Yes.
but are your values aligned with the business? It's all about.
Right.
I mean, that's why leaders create an employee value proposition
Yeah.
to show their values, and then the idea is, does this person align with our values? Not, does he align with our wine drinking culture or
Yes.
hard charging? And I'll take that even further, but I'll let you kind of talk from there.
Yeah. No, it's funny you mentioned wine drinking culture. So I was the only exec in a team of executives where they were all males. And I was working in the retail industry. So I used to sit around the table when there's a CEO and all of the direct reports to the CEO of a very big business of turnover of billions of dollars. And I used to struggle to actually put a word through because they were all shouting at each other. Then I started adopting a different attitude, which is I don't need to be like them if they feel that they are outspoken, etc. Because that was the unconscious bias and around that table, regardless. So, and I used to wait for everybody to calm down and lower my voice, and then basically say what I wanted to say. And on the wine drinking culture, so all of the guys wanted to go out in the evening, have a drink after work, but I just wanted to go home and rest. So that and this is very important. That's that voice in your head that tells you, be careful, you are not fitting in. It's tiring. So because you see, when we talk bias, we always talk from the other side, from the people who are being biased. But when you say, this is who I am, and I don't need to try to fit in because this is who I am, right? But there's always that voice in the back of your head that tells you, you need to give it a shot. Why don't you try? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And it's a lot of pressure.
Well, it's what they call imposter syndrome. It's you're trying
You
to
got a
be.
name for everything.
Well, I mean, hey, there are PhDs that have studied this, and
Yes.
I think since the murder of George Floyd, and since like a lot of
Mm.
people are have truly gotten into this, I think these terms are sort of coming to light. But I want to talk about, because what you said was interesting. You brought up a couple of points, and I want to go further into that, because you said, because I was a woman, I waited until they stopped shouting at each other, and I
Yes.
lowered my voice.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that a lot of women especially have experienced, because and tell me if I'm wrong, and tell me about your own experiences, because I've heard that, like, people have their opinions if, like, women try to shout over men or something, because, like, they would consider them aggressive or something
Mhm.
like that. So why did you not go? Why did you not shout with them? Why did you wait for them to stop and then lower your voice? Like, what was the thinking behind that?
Just to grab their attention. And mind you, even though I was working in an Arab country, I was working with an Indian family group. So I was the only person who was non Indian who was around that table. So it's interesting as well from a cultural perspective, because the conversation used to switch out of English every once in a while. And this is something that a lot of the multicultural work environment experience, and which is suddenly you switch to your normal self, if you know what I mean, which shows a bit of lack of respect. So my thinking of lowering my voice is because I don't want to also show lack of respect like everybody else, because we are having a conversation, we are not in a shouting match. And I've actually seen a lot of situations like that, where and I've been part of a group actually in South Africa that does the Gender Mainstreaming Awards, where a lot of females tell their stories, and female executives. So we are talking about execs in big businesses, and it's around that particular subject, which is putting your thoughts out, and then getting everybody else to listen to you, and that happens only after a period of time, right? Because you need to gain that trust. So this is where, when you talk about gender, where why would a woman put in an effort to gain the respect and the trust of everybody that's around her? But if it's a male that comes in as an exec, straight away comes in with that trust and power. And this is the thinking that is interesting for me, because it's sometimes it's unconscious, as you said. It's not that they are wanting to do that, but it's unconscious. And a lot of businesses actually started doing unconscious bias trainings. Yeah, exactly. That's Tessa mentioned that. So most companies' interview processes are behavioral based and not value based. So, but if it is as well behavioral based, how would you tell that somebody has that unconscious bias, but you're bringing them in?
Well, but I think that's the thing with unconscious bias is you don't know, but you know, the thing about unconscious bias, and you know, I'd like to get to sort of how we go about building diverse teams and reducing bias, but you know, unconscious bias. So there was a statistic I saw that your brain processes 40 pieces of information consciously per second, and 11 million pieces of unconscious information. So like you are robotically thinking about you are robotically wired to think about these unconscious things. And you know, like sometimes people don't necessarily think about when they're hiring about certain affinity biases, or or halo biases, for example, which is like one positive trait sort of impacts your entire makeup of the entire person. It's the same with there's a halo effect and then the horns effect, which is the one negative aspect. So and then obviously affinity bias is you have the same, you know, you readily identify more with people who are from like your same background and you know, background or gender or that sort of thing. And so you know, people sometimes unconsciously process this, or they look unconsciously for similarities. Like, oh, we went to school together. Oh, you went to that. You know, you went to that company, or hey, like you like skydiving, or you like I mean, using my LinkedIn for example, you know, people identify with the perennially disappointed Dallas Cowboys fan because you know, they are disappointed fans of other teams, and so it's like a, you know, it's sort of an affinity in terms of that way. And so for us to break that conscious and unconscious bias, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of effort. So
and it needs to be intentional, right? I mean, otherwise.
So that's the thing. Like let's talk about hiring, because a lot of people, they use the tactic of what's called, and there's a few employer brand people that are on this call, and they all know about what's called spray and pray, which is, I press the button on Indeed and I fire it out, and I hope the right people apply. But if you're truly trying to create diverse teams, and you're truly trying to build a diverse pipeline, you can't do that. So, how you got to get started is, first of all, you got to write inclusive job descriptions. You can't use ninja. You can't use guru. You can't use rock star. These words are male dominant. These words are male dominant, and they also have an age bias connotation. So we have that, and then it's also about, we talk about intentionality. It's about going where the people are. In the United States, we have what's called historically Black colleges and universities, which were created because Black people did not have the opportunity to go to white schools, and so they created, great schools like Howard and Morehouse and Prairie View A&M, and these are amazing educational institutions. But if you want to recruit people, you go there. You go to networking groups. You get referrals from your Black coworkers, brown coworkers, LGBTQ, your female coworkers. And
so basically, what you're saying, you can't say I can't find the right people. You need to be intentional to actually find them.
That's the thing, is everybody uses the excuse of I can't find the right people, and that's not true, because there are plenty of resources. Like tech people say it all the time. Well, I don't know where Black engineers are. Well, guess what? Black in tech. Alex made a good point. Ninja can be offensive to Asian job seekers. It's a simple, but see, it's a simple example of bias that some people know, some people don't understand, that others might deem offensive or cause them not to apply. But it's super easy. It's super easy to find these candidates. You go to Black Girls Code, you go to Latinas in Tech. There are so many women in tech groups. And it's the same. And then if there's not a pipeline, we go even harder and we create the pipeline. So, you and I originally connected because we were talking about programs like Emiratization and Saudiization. And here in the United
States, I remember you were interested in knowing more. And on that, I actually want to share my experience with Saudiization, but specifically with feminization in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
So when I first joined that group in my last role as HR director, we had 3% only of the females in the retail stores as working as sales associates in the retail stores, for obvious reasons in Saudi Arabia. So only 3% of 10,000 people were females. And the funny thing is that the business was struggling from a revenue perspective. And when I went and I did some analysis, you actually notice that the females over there have doubled the productivity of the males. So it's a business decision that you say, first, I want to be in. I need a diverse workforce or people that are working with me. But I wanna improve productivity, right? So I want to be selfish from a business perspective. So in a period of 12 to 18 months, I actually increased it from 3% to 47% females. But when I first came up with a proposal, I was told that I was crazy because you need to actually split the stores and make sure that, for the people who don't know, who are watching, that at any point in time in a shift, there needs to be a male and a female cannot be working together on the same in the same area where they are selling in a store, unless if there is a third person that is there. So on the same shift, you need to ensure at any point in time in one of the categories, let's say menswear, if it's a clothing store, at any point in time you need to have in the menswear 3 people, and if and 2 of them needs to be females and 1 of them needs to be males. And then I said, okay, fine, let's just do it. And we were intentional, and we actually succeeded in 12 to 18 months. And that's the thing, because the easiest answer is always no, it cannot be done, or I can't find the right people. And that's what you were saying.
So I think too, there's so many statistics that are out there. There were just some that I was reading this morning. I mean, diverse management teams, the bottom line has increased 19%. People with diverse management teams are 1.7 times to be innovative leaders in their market segments. 67% of job seekers say diversity, equity, and inclusion is important.
Yes.
And then 85% of CEOs say diversity, increase their bottom line. And then 70% of diverse teams are likely to capture new market segments. And like, that's the thing. And like that last one, I think is the most important. Like if you're a true businessman or woman, why are you like, what's preventing you? Like, I think the one group in the United States with with an increasing purchasing power, I believe, and my friend Tessa on here can probably help me out with this stat, is like Black women have the most increased purchasing power, I feel like, over the past 10 years. And it's like, if you are not creating space and creating space for diverse leaders in your organization, well, then you're losing out on billions and sometimes trillions of dollars.
Right. What about upskilling?
So
that's a good point.
Well, so let's talk about upskilling, because going back to what we talked about in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, and even the United States, I think I think there is for some reason there is an aversion a lot of times for people to train, because either it takes them away from their main business duties, or they don't want to, or they're ill-equipped to. And I find that and upskilling can be done in a variety of ways. You can create a bank of training. You can give people what's called stretch assignments. So if I'm an HR assistant, I'm giving generalist assignment, or if I'm an HR manager, I'm giving my HR assistant generalist assignments so they can continue to grow. If I'm an engineering manager, I'm giving my project engineer maybe some leadership tasks. Like it's that simple, but I think, as we talked about at first, it all has to be intentional. A lot of like Saudi Arabia, and you could probably help me speak to this, but like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, they imported a lot of foreign talent. And that hurt them, and what they did was they neglected education systems and workforce systems of their own people, which is why Saudiization, Emiratization, it has been going on. But has that truly been successful? Whereas they should have been doing that intentionally starting out.
Yes. So it depends on, there's different countries in the region. Some of them have done it very successfully. So and I've experienced this as well myself. Actually, for a period of 5 years that I was working there, I had somebody who was developing to take over my role in 5 years' time. So and we had a development plan. So development there is actually very intentional, but it started off late, and that's exactly what. So you're 100% on that. It started off late, but now it's the impact of it is really amazing, because they're grooming the people from the time that they finish school into university, with clarity of career planning, direction, development. They bring in experts into the system, that they bring in the skills from anywhere around the world, but they are clear that one of your duties actually as or I won't call it duties, but one of your main responsibilities is to train somebody to take on your role. And and it's and this is where you go back to culture, right? It's it's ingrained in the values and the culture that I'm giving back actually to this country that is loving me, that is giving me a great place to be, that is very inclusive, that has a great culture where everybody is happy, that has a culture of excellence. So you feel that you are part of that system, and you are being loved because you are giving back your skills and you're sharing your knowledge. um, it's an amazing dynamic. It's difficult to explain it unless you've been there and
Well,
you've lived that.
yeah, I was going to say that's interesting because, obviously, I think in the United States, and I think in other countries as well, like I think we wish mentorship worked like that. And and once again, we talk about everything has to be intentional. Like I feel like it's the same way, you teach your kids, and I don't have any kids, so I'm probably not the foremost subject on children right now. But, every time you teach a lesson to your kids, you teach it intentionally because you want them to learn, and, you want them to take it with it. And I think that's the same thing. I think where companies fall short internally is that succession planning, especially as it relates to underrepresented groups, ascending to management positions and leadership positions. Because I think what happens is we have managers that can't really have that don't really have this conversation, and that suffer from that affinity bias, and that are almost focused on what's called, the KPI Kevins of the world. It's an American euphemism, but and then the leaders who are so focused on the bottom line that they don't necessarily see that succession plan in the middle. And I think if I were a leader, what I would do, how I would change it, is I would meet every new hire, and within the first month, we would give them a skills tracker to show, hey, like, this is how you go to the next level. This is how you go to the next level. This is where we expect you to be in the next level. This is the skills that you learn. And then for the manager as well, it's like, hey, this is what they should learn. These are skills we want you to learn in the process. But I like that rotational concept of that. In sports, they have what's called a coaching tree. And so, these three assistant coaches have been a part of this coach's coaching tree, and these coaches built their own programs, and then they all, now there is a bias that goes along with it because they all kind of think in the same way. And if anybody wants to know about coaching trees, happy to give you a 2-hour long conversation on it. But that's what we in the workplace need to have, is like we need to turn our managers into motivators and say, hey, this is how you build teams. This is how you build
inclusive teams, right?
Right. This is how you build inclusive teams. Like, here's the thing: is people. It's like 50% of people leave because, and especially millennials, they leave because they have nobody gives them a career path. Nobody gives them a career path, and nobody's interested in mentoring them. And you're losing out on a lot of talent with that. And so you have to be intentional. It's not just weekly, or it's not just 6-month performance reviews. You've got to do one-on-one. You've got to do one-on-one meetings every day. You've got to give them stretch opportunities. You've got to pay for professional development. Obviously, you've got to pay them, and you've got to pay them fairly. And that's something else we can touch briefly on, which is pay equity. But then you have to give them, you have to be what's called, so Minda Hart, she's a celebrated author here in the United States. You have to be success partners. So especially, if you are a white male or a white female, and you are mentoring Black, Brown, LGBT, PTQ members, you have to be intentional, and you have to be their success partners. You have to advocate for them, and you have to give them assignments that show them
And that stretch them as well.
Right, to the workforce. And that's what a lot of
Yes.
managers don't do, is there aren't a lot of success partners. It's not allies. It's not allies is a weird word. We only use that when we talk about like world wars. It's success partners, because you are a partner in their true success. And once you build them up, then it's your job to build somebody else up, and then they build somebody else up. And that I think that's really, that's the thing. Like, everybody talks about bias, but it all boils down to how intentional are you about building up the people, building up the people that are already there, because it costs way more. More companies want to pay more money, like pay agents
to bring in new people.
Right. Yeah. They pay, $30,000-$40,000 to bring in a new manager, when, you can bring in that, when you can spend $10K on promoting and developing your own people. It's that simple. But I think we also talk about the bias for the way things always have been. And that's the way I think a lot of executives think. So I know I talked for a long time. My friend Tessa, she's a highly successful engineer in Dallas, and she sort of echoed the point on management does not equate to leadership. I think you see a lot of memes, a lot of discussions on like manager versus a leader. A manager does not. I don't know about you, but for me, it doesn't elicit like leadership or inspiration. It's like you're a manager.
Yes.
Whereas a leader is, it's more inspirational. So, and maybe you turn your managers into motivators. So
how would you reduce, actually that's a good question that came up. So how would you reduce that unconscious bias in hiring? I mean, what are some of the questions actually that you should be asking in the hiring process?
So
that are more inclusive, right? Like, is there anything called more inclusive questions?
So I think it's less about inclusive questions and more about like I think it's more about like what to do in the interview process. So, I'm always a fan of structured interviews, and structured interviews is everybody gets the same questions, and you create a tool, a panel tool or some sort to evaluate all candidates from those specific questions. You can have, and so I will say, like, there are some places and it's like, hey, this is the answer we are looking for, and sometimes you grade it on that specific scale. You also ask them essential questions related to the job. It's about, can you do this job, not can I have a beer with you? And that eliminates the opinion of, oh, well, yeah, this person can fit in our culture, or, oh yeah, like he or she is super nice. You don't ask about their marital status. You don't ask what part of town they live in. It's about, and for example, like, you have an accent, and so in an interview, I'm not, I wouldn't say, hey, you have a nice accent, where's that from? Like, it
reminded me about something. I was once asked in an interview, but that's like long time ago. Are you planning to have kids anytime soon?
Yeah. So, and which is something that women get more often than men. But I feel like in certain industries, like, women get asked that and then it gets held against them. But like, these are things, these are things that A, are illegal, but B, you need to ask about the essential job functions. And I think sometimes interviewers who are not trained on interviews, they tend to veer off, because once again, a lot of times interviewers will look for similarities and say, oh, this person is just like me, let's hire them. And I think that's why panel interviews are so important too, because you'll have 3 or 4 people, and that way you get a summary judgment of everybody rather than just like one person.
Yeah. And on that point, Adam, we spoke about this on several times before, and the platform economy and the new wave of remote and virtual work and being an independent consultant, etc. And how does this impact bias, in your opinion?
The platform and freelance culture?
Yes.
So I think it can be a multiple-edged sword, because I think, number one, the platform economy can allow for upskilling of various professionals. I think it can allow people to, if you guys are fully staffed, for example, and you want to build a pipeline or you want to try somebody else new, it can provide valuable experience. So, even if you're putting a data entry position on a platform to try somebody else, it builds that work relationship, which gives you that sort of leg up on others. And, I'd say it's more democratic as well.
Yeah, I would add something to that as well. When you think about freelancing, you think, and especially virtually on platforms like OneCircle, like TopTal, etc. You think location agnostic, right? Because you can be in the US and doing a project with a company that is based in South Africa. You could be in the UK and doing a project with a company that is based in Australia. This is where I go back to your earlier point, which is your interest becomes more around the skills and the capacity and capability of actually delivering on your project. And this is what's driving you as a business or as a leader to post that project and we actually want the work to be done, regardless of where the person is. There is no bias when it comes to that, ideally, right? And this is where as well, like, for example, for us, that's really critical in our mission, because we don't really show where the person is based. But as once they join our platform as an independent consultant or as a freelance HR consultant, what is more important is which areas that they've covered as areas of expertise, or which countries they have experience in. But they could be based anywhere. It doesn't really matter. What is important is that they can advise you, and if required for legal requirements, to advise you legally on certain issues, because they have worked in those countries, regardless of where their nationality, where they come from, etc.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think that, I think that there are a variety of I think there's a variety of biases where it comes to like country biases and how you've worked. And, I think freelance projects are a great way to inclusivize, I think, your HR bench,
Yes.
also upskill others. I think especially during this time, what you're finding is a lot of people are like, hey, like we don't have the budget to hire yet, but we do want to give you contracts. And it's all about building the relationships. And especially like if I was in a hiring position and we didn't have the budget, but we had budgets for contracts, we talk about diversity in hiring and upskilling others. I would partner with a HBCU that had, like, for example, an HR program, and you have these people do HR assistant tasks, like straight out of college or that sort of thing. And that way you're giving them real world experience, you're giving
True.
them relationships. And, yeah, in a down economy, sure, like you're not able to provide them with like general, the full opportunity that everybody desires, but you are able to provide them with, either micro internships or micro jobs that like they can put on their resume and ultimately bolster themselves. So
Yeah, that's amazing. We were actually having similar discussions with universities here in South Africa, where they want, as part of their requirements is for the students in their senior year and then the master's students to actually do internships. And they want them to have that international exposure, but as well to have that growth mindset that the world is my oyster and I'm not restricted to my geographical location, but I can actually work anywhere while I'm still at home. And if I am on the right platform, I build my reputation online, that I can work on any projects from anywhere around the world. And it's refreshing to see that, because it changes the mindset of the young generation, that I'm not tied to a location. I am not tied to a nationality, to a location, to a gender, etc. I am in control of my future, because it is my skills and my knowledge and my experience that is actually important. And that's the right mindset. And you're right, catching them at this age is really important, because you'll be building a completely different generation, right?
well, and I think companies, when they talk about inclusivity, I think that's something they need to look out for, because if they're not going to intentionally help their other people, then, or their internal people, then I think you'll have people look abroad.
Right.
I mean, look at myself. I have worked to build like a national and international network, because I say, okay, well, what is the best way for me to upskill? And that's the thing. If your company, if you're a company that isn't intentional about upskilling, isn't intentional about inclusivity, well, having platforms like this are going to have your people look elsewhere. So
Yes, that's
um,
true. That's true. Okay, so we still have a few minutes. Maybe we can take some questions. Do you have any questions, guys, for me or for Adam?
I was gonna say, I know the people, a few of the people on here, I'm good friends with, and are also like very, very well versed in this kind of stuff. So a lot of the people that are on here are like, both HR and employer brand like experts. And I think that's something too, especially when especially as this goes to a worldwide audience,
Mm,
um, is, there's the recruiting, there's the upskilling, but there's also the branding part. And if you are not intentional about featuring, your diverse talent in management, in leadership, you're not going to get that diverse talent either. And
yes.
it's about sharing their stories and inspiring others, because if other people see, hey, like, obviously there is somebody who has been successful in this role, then it inspires others to get up there and be, it inspires others to join your company as well. So I think that's something people need to realize as well. I mean, that's why I think employer branding and people who can tell stories um, are so important, because you want to give a voice to that diverse talent that encompasses your organization,
Yeah.
because it's an inspiration. Yeah, it's an inspiration to others. So
Yeah, that's true. So, somebody says that's Alex. Amen to that.
Yeah.
Okay, then
Well, I was
that
going to say, well, because I want to ask you, because a lot of the people that are on here are in the United States, but I want to hear about from you what maybe interesting efforts you've seen in Lebanon, in the Arab world, in South Africa, of ways and programs that people are creatively sort of upskilling their talent, but also working to find diverse diverse perspectives in companies.
So I can talk about my experience in countries like Dubai, UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar, and the efforts for diversity and inclusion are very much intentional, and they are ingrained in the company's strategy and in the culture itself. So we spoke about nationalization programs, but we didn't speak about actually ensuring that you have the right mix of cultures within your teams. Because lots of times, when you get a new CEO in a position, the CEO would like to bring in his own team or her own team on board, right? And this is where the conscious bias comes in, is that person in leadership wants to bring in people that he or she strongly believes that they're gonna provide support. But then support can come in so many ways, not only maybe based on skills, but it could be that I can work actually with those people. And so the reason why I'm saying is that there are ways around that in the region, in the Middle East. And one of the ways around that is something that you have rightly mentioned, which is panel interviews and decision making when it comes to the hiring is not only with one person. It's actually with a team of peers, and the senior leaders actually interfere in the hiring process. And we used to have dashboarding and everything to ensure that we have diversity among the teams. And it used to be within the senior teams. I call them targets, KPIs, whatever you want to call them. But people were actually rewarded when they have diverse and then an inclusive teams. They were actually rewarded at the end of the year. So and then it becomes a way of working, right? And when it comes to whether Emiratization or Saudization, etc., it's the mindset that you build in there with the people, that we want to develop the youth. We want to bring them into the business. We want to train them. And then this, there's that fine line when you are training and developing somebody and you are worried about your job, right? And it's that feeling of safety and security that businesses give to you, that as long as you are here and you are developing others, you are sharing knowledge, you are sharing your expertise, you will only progress from one role to the other, and you will only grow with us.
So I'm curious though, because I think a lot of people on here would be fascinated because you do have this like worldwide experience. So how did you go about? I mean, obviously the Gulf states are a very, very machismo culture. So how did you go about convincing them? What did you do to show them to implement these sort of diverse hiring practices that allowed the companies to be more inclusive?
Interesting. But as well, those regions are very much bottom line driven and profitability driven as businesses, right? And they've been used to double-digit growth for a long period of time. So my approach was basically to pilot projects and to show that when we have on this particular team more diversity, whether culturally, etc., but diversity nonetheless, the productivity of the people is much higher, and the impact on the revenue is much higher. And most times it was actually double. So I have done my own pilot projects, and based on that, I actually got an approval from the chairman of the board to go harsh on implementing that strategy. And uh, we and this is where I told you, in 18 months time, almost we hired 5 to 6,000 females into the business,
So
which is not a small number.
I was gonna say, because I knew in the past, like Saudi Arabian women, it was hard for them to get into the workforce. So like,
Yes.
how did you go about hiring qualified Saudi Arabian females and bring them up in the workforce?
Right. So there's a couple of things here. One, which is you need to go beyond the candidate that you are talking to. Given
Sure.
the culture over there, you needed to actually build the brand from an inclusivity perspective, but as well from a respect perspective, that we respect the females that are working with us, that we ensure that they have their own resting area, that we ensure that we follow the traditions of the country. So all of this, and you spoke about that, Adam, and you spoke about branding. So it's going all out there to say, look, we are intentional about this shift, and we will make sure that we respect the local culture and tradition, and we will ensure that we implement it. And then that mindset of not only the candidates, but the mindset of their own families is that that's a great group for you to work with. It's a great company. I know that my daughter is going to be safe. I know that my sister is going to be happy. I know that my wife is going to be respected. And this is how actually we managed to do that shift. Finding a qualified females, we actually found we went to universities and we hired students and graduates, and we put them on what we called fast tracking development program, and they were being mentored and trained, and that's because we formalized the whole process, and it was a group-wide decision. And that speaks to what you were saying in terms of, you can't just let it be and say, yeah, whatever. You need to actually make a plan.
Yeah.
So,
and I think it's a good wrap up. It's all about sort of making the plan. I think
yes.
is the first thing that people need to do. Make the plan, be intentional. And then I think something that was interesting to you is make it safe.
Yes.
Make space. For all these 6,000 women that were hired, you assured their families that you would keep them safe. And
Right.
once they saw that, they referred others. And I think that's what we talk about is like, it's make a plan, be intentional, make it safe, and make space, and
Yes.
then bring room for their development. And so I think, even in a country like Saudi Arabia, I think we see that if you adopt this plan, it works.
Right.
It's not a complicated math problem. It's not rocket science. It's about treating people like people and giving them room to grow their talent.
To grow. Yes, you're right. Thank you very much, Adam, really for sharing your experience and your thoughts and being part of our community. And yeah, thanks to everyone who attended. And I hope to see you all in the next yellow rooms. You can find us online on onecirclehr.com, and you can as well find us on LinkedIn, or you can follow us on Twitter on @onecirclehr. Thanks a lot, Adam, and thanks everyone.
All right.
And
Thank you.
yes, We'll see you very soon.